If you have grown up in India just like me, you would have seen that in many places there is this practice of worshipping the snakes, ophiolatry as it is called, the serpent worship. And that's really the book that I've got with me today. It's called Naaga, Discovering the Extraordinary World of Serpent Worship. It is written by K. Hari Kumar. And the book really takes you through the journey of the world of snakes and how they are worshipped, particularly in specific parts of India. As I said, you might be aware of this. In certain parts, especially where I grew up in the Himalayas and then deep down in the south, in Kerala, parts of Tamil Nadu, parts of Karnataka, you'll find this common form of worship. And many of the deities, in many other parts also, in smaller temples, you'll find this act of serpent worship. In fact, even among the mainstream gods of Hinduism, you'll find in some ways that this snake deity, serpent deity, it is there in many of the temples. It's also there in the many of the mythological tales of Hinduism and Buddhism, in fact. But this book, the Naaga, it goes way beyond that. It captures all kinds of stories related to serpents, whether it's in India, it's in Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology, or anywhere else. It tells you pretty much everything that you need to know about the world of serpent worship. In fact, when I started reading this book, I felt like there's just too much information, and I would have preferred maybe author telling me a story, maybe about a few forms of serpent worships and about a few places. But it's just a lot of information to process at the beginning, and yet there's a lot to learn about. Clearly, it's a massive world. It's a world that has existed across cultures, across time, and when you think about it, the archetype of it, it really makes sense how this idea of serpent worship or just imagining a snake, how that has been so deeply connected with the human mind. And the book kind of starts with the mention of snakes and their form of worship in different cultures. But I think it really hits the chord when it talks about these two ideas. One is more the Western idea, which is where the serpent of the Eden, let's say it's the biblical idea, and then you will see in many other ideas from there on, it has some kind of negative connotation. But then it also talks about, on the other hand, this culture of India, where Naaga, the Nagaloka, or Nag, as in snake in form of deities, how they are seen positively. Or at least in both ways, positively as well as negatively, but not just negatively. So that's something that I found really interesting, and I'm sure you would have heard about the Serpent of Eden. In case you haven't, let me give you a brief account of what really happens there. So, in the book of Genesis in Bible, Adam and Eve, the first man and woman created by the God, they live in the Garden of Eden, and which is really a kind of paradise. It is abundant in life. So that's where our Adam and Eve are residing. They have freedom to do everything except one thing, that is, they are forbidden to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's where the serpent character comes in. The serpent, which is more cunning, approaches Eve and tries to manipulate her. It says Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And at that point, Eve answers, yeah, we can eat from any other tree, but not that one. And at that point, Serpent kind of brainwashes her and somehow leads her to eat the apple from that tree, and then also shares it with Adam. So this was the act of disobedience, and of course, that was the fall from innocence for Adam and Eve. And then they are condemned and they are expelled from the Garden of Eden, and they are sent to earth. That's where the suffering of human beings, that's the fundamental idea, not just Christianity, but many other religions, that life is fundamentally an act of suffering, and we are condemned to suffer. And that's where the origins of this story lie. But that's how you can see the imagery, the idea of the serpent, which is somewhat negative. So that's one. That's where the biblical ideas come from. Not just biblical, other Abrahamic religions also. You'll find in most of these monotheistic religions this negative connotation. And then when you go to the modern, more pop culture, you'll find that once again the snakes, they have been portrayed in a negative light. And it kind of makes sense also. Most of the humans, they are scared of snakes. And even though it's not an innate fear like some of the animals, we don't have that, as there is enough evidence that when children, they first see snakes, and if there is no fear in their mind because of some kind of cultural teachings or conversations around that, then they are not really scared of snakes. They are very much curious about them. And yet, when we grow up, we get, most of us, we do have this fear of snakes. So that kind of connects with this emotion that we have, that of fear. So in most of the pop culture, you will find the snakes in negative light. But that's not how it's been in Indian culture. Indian culture, in many schools of Hinduism, many stories that come from different kinds of deities and their own mythologies. It is very close to the cultures that existed previous to the Christian cultures in the West or other monotheistic cultures in the West, where serpent worship used to be the thing. And you find that in various forms of ancient Indian literature. For example, the Mahabharata distinguishes between good and bad serpents. And then, as many of you would know, the Naagas, that kind of special species, they have been mentioned in many of the texts. It's a semi-divine race of half-human, half-serpent beings, and they were believed to roam freely. But then, at one point, they were also banished to their own Nagaloka by Lord Brahma. So they exist in their own worlds. And as I said, it's not just them, or it's not just one or two deities. There are so many local deities all around the country that you can find, where they are worshipped by the local people, and they are considered sacred. And the author also briefly talks about why these ancient people found these serpents divine. What were those specific qualities that they saw in these creatures that they admired them? So he says that these ancient people, they admired serpents for their unique and fiery nature, their ability to move swiftly and fluidly without limbs, the capacity to change forms. They could move in spiral, and they could then move forward with great speed. That adds to the mystique. And also, they are noted for their longevity, or their ability to rejuvenate by shedding their old skin. It symbolizes renewal and cyclical nature of life. So there are so many factors, but at the same time, this just symbolism that somehow connects with the human psyche. And that is something he mentions somewhere later in the book, where he mentions this kundalini. And I think these two ideas are connected. The way deep down in our psyche we connect with the snakes is very much related to our own consciousness, our own anatomy, and it's somehow this idea of having that mysterious element in snakes combined with their potency that somehow makes them mesmerizing, almost divine, like something that you're curious about, something that you find powerful, and yet something that you do not and cannot know much about. It just comes and goes, it disappears. It's not something that you spend too much time with, which you can do with other mammals or birds. You can't do that with serpents. So there is this element of mystery, and that perhaps led to the worship part. But as I said, the other thing, the symbolism and how that has been conceived and how that has been related in the Kundalini Yoga, that is also quite fascinating. And the author in this case specifically mentions that he's not really expert in this, but is still trying to think about it, think this through, and kind of trying to give us explanations. So what is Kundalini? Those of you who don't know, it's at the very basic, it's about energy, that inner energy, spiritual energy that we have. It is ascending the spine, passing through the different chakras, the spiritual chakras that we mentioned. We have 7 of them, and you will study about them in yoga philosophy. When you study about yoga, that's what you believe to have, that you have those 7 chakras. You work on them one by one, starting from the bottom of the spine till to the top of your head, which is the ultimate chakra. So in these chakras, you believe that these are the mystical centers of consciousness, and when you awaken them, then your consciousness awakens, and eventually that's how you find enlightenment. But the author goes beyond this just mere spiritual aspect of it. He talks about the anatomy, and he says that the anatomical parallels, they are quite important in this case, and we should not really ignore them. So if you picture your body stripped of the flesh and leave only the spinal cord and the brain, what it looks like is pretty much like a serpent. The spinal cord, it forms the long sinuous body of the snake, and the brain on top of it, it looks like the shape of a cobra's hood. And as you would be aware, the spinal cord, it carries the impulses that then give rise to our most primal instincts, and at the same time other refined thoughts as well. So all the information or signal that is being carried, it happens through this network. And he says that Carl Jung also made a similar kind of a suggestion, where he's comparing this serpent form with the spinal cord. So in that sense, when you think about it, this image of snake then becomes the symbol of profound transformation and awakening. It's related to your physiology. So in that sense, working on your chakras or working on the spiritual energy is about working on your neurological system, and it really helps you. So in one way, you can say that even if you ignore the concept of spirituality or consciousness, you can just work on your physical health, and it'll get better. it'll improve when you work on yoga or these practices. But of course, that's the author's viewpoint, and he's trying to avoid the idea of spirituality here and probably trying to assert more scientific view here. But as far as the ancient were concerned, they played more with the metaphors and stories and not the scientific facts and not just the mere logical facts there. So they had just like we have seven chakras in the spine that are believed to be there in the spiritual conversations. At the same time, the metaphor is that of the seven worlds or seven lokas in Indian mythology. So then author makes really interesting point that it could be a perfect metaphor for the seven worlds that are out there, probably symbolizing the seven chakras which are inside. And that's really an interesting spiritual perspective, because what is spirituality ultimately? It tells us that whatever is out there, whatever we are perceiving, whatever good or bad that we see out there, it's inside us. It is in our consciousness, it is in our minds. And what does Indian spirituality or Indian worldview about enlightenment or the ultimate freedom, moksha, nirvana, what does it suggest? To just find freedom, find the ultimate freedom, to merge with the universe, to become one with the universe. And of course, it's going to be a scary process. When you do that, you break loose and you get out of these boundaries of physical materialism, and you become one with the universal consciousness. And it's the ultimate thing to do, but it's kind of scary. And then once again, it makes more sense to make the comparisons with the serpents, because once again they instill some kind of fear in you, but at the same time they have this element of mystery and inspiration that made many of the ancient people bow down to them. So ultimately, what we learn in this book is these serpents, they are worshipped and respected across different subcultures in India. They kind of representing this hidden knowledge and realms and worlds which can be beyond the ordinary perception. And through symbolism, through metaphors, we are supposed to learn a lot more than it first meets the eye. Whether it's the Kundalini energy that we have inside us, or that this idea of Ananta Shesha, this snake who is believed to hold the universe in balance. There is a lot to learn about this hidden interconnectedness between the material and the mystical world. And maybe, just maybe, snake as a metaphor is a very interesting thing to find that bridge. These are fascinating and extraordinary claims, and something that raises everyone's curiosity. It certainly did that to me, and that's how I started reading more of these stories. As I said, there are so many of them, and I don't think I can discuss them in one episode here. So I'll come back to you in the next episode, and I'll share some of those stories, some of the interesting stories that I found, and that I feel you'd also enjoy. So I would share some of those stories with you. But for now, I'll take your leave and leave you with these thoughts about this idea of serpent worship, the symbolism, and how that comes across in different ways, whether it's the direct worship of the deity, the serpent, or the yoga through which we are awakening the Kundalini, and then we are seeing the symbolism of the snakes, and how that, in terms of philosophy, is leading us towards something profound in spirituality. all these things are interconnected. We cannot separate them. And that's what makes it so fascinating. And then, of course, all the stories that we are going to talk about, that also adds another layer to it. So, all of that is really interesting. And I hope if you get a chance to read the book, you too are going to have a fabulous time. So, thank you very much for listening. I will catch you the next time with more serpent stories. Thank you.